Listen guys, I knew this was gonna be terrible the minute the opening played. I was supposed to see Little Women, but instead, I got stuck with Dolittle. Dolittle? Why Dolittle? What even is this movie? Like, please someone tell me what this is. It's poorly acted, awfully directed, the music choice is confusing at best, the editing is abysmal, seriously guys, the editing was awful, and the plot is so hard to follow that it's kind of funny. Like, that's the only time I laugh. So basically, this movie is about a guy who can talk to animals, but when he lost his wife, he hid in his house and then he works for the queen to go find some basic mustache twirling villain. I think. Give me a break, guys. I saw this movie in February. The quest is all over the place and really awful when you stop to think about it. It's got secret treasures and temples and dragons, but hey, if you like fart jokes and celebrity-voiced animals with uncanny mouths, I guess this is the movie for you. Shoutouts to you. Is there anything redeemable? The dragon looks cool. And he spat fire. I like dragons. They're cool. So this movie gets points for having a dragon. That's it. The Princess Switch 2, Switched Again, is laughably bad. I found The Princess Switch 1 to be a decent movie, but they absolutely lost their minds with the second one. Now Vanessa Hudgens gets to come back as a snobby cousin from another country. They basically just wanted a triplet, but that wouldn't make sense coming from the first one, so they just made her cousin. This new cousin is so stupid, and I really enjoyed her. She had some truly embarrassing lines and deliveries that made me beam and cry at the same time. I didn't even know that was possible. The story is the same as the first one, except this time, they decide to prolong everything to the point where 50% of this movie is basically just people talking about nothing. I'm not even joking. There's no plot for 50% of this movie. The only thing that is even remotely decent about this film is that it is absolutely bonkers, so it at least has some rewatchability. But there are about 100 more Christmas movies I would sooner recommend. Yes, finally, I can finally talk about how much I hate Tenet. Tenet is surprisingly terrible. I'm not one of those people who say Christopher Nolan films are bad. I actually really enjoyed Memento and Batman Begins, but Tenet is easily his worst film that I've seen, and probably the biggest misfire in an action movie I've seen in a while. I've watched videos and I understand the plot, okay? It makes sense to me and I understand it, but as I said in my first Letterboxd review, just because I understand it doesn't mean I like it. You know why I understood the story when it was in the video? It's because it was presented piece by piece, analyzing one character at a time. Tenet, on the other hand, has so many intersecting plots that aren't presented chronologically or in a way that makes sense to me. We keep jumping back and forth in the timelines and it's way too hard to follow. Nolan bit off more than he could chew with this one, honestly. But whatever, even if the plot is understandable, I still hate the movie. The cinematography was really bad. I don't know why, but Nolan sometimes decides to use a shaky camera in some movies and not others. Like in Inception, it was probably implemented the poorest, and I had no idea what was going on, but in Batman Begins, the shots were actually pretty clean and impressive. In this movie, he uses his shaky camera so much that it almost ruins the really creative action, which is one of the things that actually make this movie almost okay. Almost. But the actors who were punching each other in the face were not. Listen, I'm sorry guys, but I really hate all the acting here. John David Washington is someone who's never worked for me, and it's the same here. He gives such a bland performance in everything he's in, and in some scenes he's way too overdramatic. The side characters were also pretty mediocre, except the villain, who gave a good performance, but it wasn't really that memorable. The worst thing about this movie though, hands down, is the sound mixing. Sound mixing and sound editing are things I find many people don't know the differences between, and I didn't know them for a long time either, so I don't blame anyone. Sound mixing is what you do with all of your sounds once you have them. Do you want to make the voices peter out, or do you want to make the music become louder, or do you want your sound to make a big loud noise out of nowhere? This moment in Whiplash is an example of fantastic sound mixing. Sound editing, on the other hand, is what you choose to use for your sounds. It can be accents of certain characters, or it can be certain sound effects. This movie's sound editing is okay, but the mixing is awful. The music that was played with this movie was so obnoxiously loud, I couldn't even understand the dialogue half the time. The music they play wasn't even good either, it's just obnoxious and distracting. This movie could have fantastic dialogue, but I was only able to hear a fraction of it. Sorry, that was really long. I just needed to talk about this movie. I'm done now, okay? Huh. A sequel to a really terrible film that everyone hated. Anyway, We Can Be Heroes is pretty bad. I'm softer on this movie than I was when I first watched it, but that has more to do with how much I hated this movie than the movie itself. But it's not all awful. The powers are pretty cool and original, which, I mean, I guess that proves that they tried a little bit. And you know, they did use them in interesting ways. So that's something. The action was decent. I thought it was pretty well choreographed, except for this one part that looks ridiculous. But this movie's just so all over the place that it's hard to call it even somewhat decent. Just like Tenet, the plot jumps around all the time, and it's really hard to be invested in anything. The characters are obnoxious and bland. I legitimately don't remember a single one of their names, even the main character, and the only ones I remember are the brats, like this singer. This movie's also trying to be some sort of dramatic soap opera of a kid's movie. Like, there's this really awkward scene where the singer starts singing with her mom about them being heroes, and it's just like, why? This movie's clearly trying to be a kid-friendly hero adventure story, so why are you doing this? Just be a kid's movie. Listen, I know this isn't made for me. I wasn't expecting, like, The Godfather, but something like Spy Kids 2 would have been nice. Did you know that The Secret Garden got a movie this year? Neither did I until I saw this extremely boring snooze fest. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this movie. I just put it on the list because it's technically a 2020 movie that I saw. But being honest, I don't remember any of it. I just saw it with my grandmother and my sister because they wanted to see it, and then I gave it a 4 on 10. It looks nice. I was fine sitting through it. There's really nothing terrible or good in this movie. It's just an extremely forgettable film that I did not like. Moving on. Yeah, I don't have much to say about Becoming either. I love good documentaries. In fact, one of my favorite series on Netflix right now is called Dirty Money, and it's way better than this movie. But I was willing to see this and I guess it was okay. Michelle Obama deserved much better than a lazily shot, boring, really pointless film. She's a really interesting person, but it feels like the director didn't even try to show her strong attributes. There are no interviews or interesting back and forths, it's just her on her book tour. I guess just seeing her talk is enough to make this better than some we've had this year, but I'm never gonna see this again. If you like it, great. But go watch Dirty Money too, it's much more interesting. When it was announced that the only superhero movies of 2020 would be Wonder Woman 1984 and We Can Be Heroes, a lot of people were disappointed, myself included. But hopefully we thought this would be a good DC movie, because most people were happy with Aquaman and Shazam. But after seeing it, the first 2/3 of this movie are as average as you can get. They really did not know how to start the plot, and it became very obvious, especially in the second act. Steve comes back, which is pretty much the one thing I did not like from the first one. And then there's a MacGuffin, because we all know DC is amazing at handling overpowered things. And then there's this ditzy girl who's definitely gonna be the villain. However, I actually do think this movie somewhat comes together at the end. Cheetah is actually a really scary opponent, though the cinematography is a bit weird. The Wonder Woman costume is super epic, and the villain stays his great self. I actually really enjoyed the villain all throughout the movie. The detail that the stone takes something in return for what it gives was actually used quite well. And yeah, it was just a really fun ending. It's not great, I mean Wonder Woman saying bland phrases was laughable, but I thought it was pretty decent. It's not something I'm begging to rewatch, but it was surprisingly not terrible. Not good, but not bad either. I saw Mulan 2020. Is it good? Nope. Is it bad? Nope. Is it as good as the original? Nope. Okay, moving on. I've already made a video on Scoob, so I'll keep it brief. I've never religiously watched the cartoon, but even I felt it was disappointing that it wasn't a real mystery. There were bits and pieces I liked, like Scooby and Shaggy, but the flaws don't really make up for them. I also enjoyed the villain and his dastardly plan, but everything kind of falls apart during the impressively stupid ending. Again, I'm trying to be brief since I already talked about this. A lot of people said it was a mixed bag, and I kinda agree. I don't know, it's fine. Me and my sister used to watch a ton of gymnastics and dance movies together, so when this came out and got good reviews, I was pretty excited. Most of the ones we watch are pretty bad and unmemorable, but the reviews gave me hope, which is why I was a little disappointed that it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. Don't get me wrong, there are some decent things in here. The characters aren't as bland as I thought they were going to be, and I did find them okay. The dances were actually really nice, the battles were fun, but the thing is, this movie doesn't really do anything to differentiate itself from the dozens of other dance movies out there. It still has the whole school versus dance dilemma, it still does the big final dance number. There's also some really stupid plot points where you can tell the writers wrote themselves into a corner. Like when they win the competition because this guy gets a boner, oh my god, that seems bad. I will say, the middle of this film where Sabrina Carpenter has to train is genuinely good, but like, that's not the whole film, so... Sonic the Hedgehog was surprisingly not terrible. He looks great, the jokes mostly land, the action's solid. Trying to keep it brief because I've already talked about this, and it's mostly good. Nothing super special, but nothing awful. I wanted to see Birds of Prey, but this was good too, even if I sat in literally the worst seat in the entire theater. Like, come on guys, there was nothing open for the Sonic movie? January 6th was one of the hardest times of my life. The entire day was filled with panic and disarray. It was truly disappointing and, frankly, embarrassing that my family would pick Croods 2 to watch instead of something really good like Old Guard. But I saw it and it was not awful. Don't get me wrong, all the things I said in my trailer review are somewhat true, but this movie had a sense of energy that I was surprisingly into. The jokes are way funnier than I expected, especially in the beginning, and the characters were all super likable and memorable. The animation is still not as good as the original because this animation is a lot more cartoony, but it still worked. The neon colors at least gave it a strong identity. This movie definitely slows down in the middle when there's literally no stakes and we have to deal with all of these cliches that are piling up. But the third act makes up for it with its absolutely insane final battle. I never thought I would see such an epic final boss battle in a Croods movie, but I did, and it was amazing. Seeing the Thunder Sisters beat up everyone was pretty awesome. More of that, please. In a year with so many inconsistent movies with lots of highs and lots of lows, Enola Holmes was one of the few that was consistently good. It had a nice charm to it and some pretty good acting, but it's not really engaging all the way through. It kind of reminded me of The Personal History of David Copperfield, both in story and feel. But that movie was a lot funnier, so I basically preferred that to this. The characters are good enough, the mystery's good enough, the missions are good enough. Yeah, this was good enough, I guess. But I don't really think it has much value to anyone who doesn't have a family to watch it with. It's good at being exactly that, though. We don't hope for... I'm sorry, people, but why can't you see that Trolls World Tour is actually good? Listen, I don't like the first one, but they took everything that worked about it and turned it into a really, really enjoyable family film. The music in Trolls World Tour is objectively better because it's not just pop, so it caters to a bunch of different people. I was actually surprised how musically good this movie was. The Born to Die cover in particular is a banger. The animation is gorgeous. Honestly, this might be the best DreamWorks animation ever. It feels like a coloring book, which is awesome. The characters are surprisingly memorable, with my favorite probably being the rock troll Barb. There's some really stupid drama scenes in this movie, but other than that, this is really solid. People just tune out the strong elements because they think Trolls as a concept is bad, or they don't give it a chance in general, I guess. Don't worry, Trolls World Tour. I'll continue to defend your honor. I literally just made a video on Soul, so I'll keep it brief. Love the characters, love the message, don't love the blue world or the way these ideas are presented. Yeah, just watch my video. It does a much better job of explaining why this is so disappointing. And I had a lot to say because it's 14 minutes long, which for me is like 10,000 words, so... The next spot goes to a Disney Plus original. Oh god, no, I didn't want to see that in my lifetime. Yup. This secret gem all of you have forgotten about already. Remember when I said Wonder Woman 1984 was the only superhero movie of the year? Well, I forgot about this. Secret Society of Second Born Royals sounds like the most awful Power Rangers ripoff ever, but I enjoyed myself a lot. The cliches in this film actually kinda help it, which is a really tough thing to do. You have to nail that corny vibe, kinda like the Raimi trilogy. This movie understands this and made the "you have special powers" trope work. One thing that really surprised me about this movie, other than it being actually good, was that the action was really smooth. It felt so clean and the powers were quite limiting, which made the struggles feel real. It's the ending where you're gonna find a lot of my problems. I didn't really have a problem with the first half, in fact I found it quite charming, But then the ending includes the worst twist villain of all time, yes, even worse than Nathan Fillion, and a bunch of really terrible contrivances that made this film suffer a lot. Other than that though, good job. I hope we get more of this and less Artemis Fowl in future Disney Plus products. Onward's good. Does what it wants to do, has a great ending. Yeah, I liked it. Cool. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is kinda a weird movie. I really liked it, but I don't love it, and I don't know why. All of the acting was great, there's some great style, and there's a bunch of fun elements. Plus, I've said so many times that I absolutely love movies like this, so why don't I love it? I guess it's because of the way these ideas are presented, like Soul. I feel like individually a lot of elements in this film are strong, but they don't really have a point in the story. There's a bunch of monologues from black men talking about white men, but there isn't really a plot to go along with it. It's more of a showcase of black problems in America, and that's super disappointing. Something like Green Book has a ton to say about racism in the South, but it's also integral to the story and changes the way events follow it. Even so, there's a lot to love here, namely the style. It's super unique and it makes the entire experience worth it. I just love the over-the-top expressions and absurd moments. It's not something you have to see, but if you're interested, give it a shot. Better than most this year, to be honest. As soon as the trailer for the Willoughbys dropped, I was super excited. This world and characters seemed so interesting to me, and I couldn't wait until the movie came out. Let's just say I was not disappointed. The Willoughbys is probably the funniest thing I've seen all year. I laughed way too many times. At first the comedy seems basic, but because the parents are so ridiculously neglectful, and their kids are always so submissive and dark, it made for such a rewatchable, intensely funny movie. Always appreciate dark humor ripped straight from Laika. On top of that, the drama's decent, the animation pops, and the side characters were awesome additions. There's not really many problems, it's just a great movie, plain and simple. But there's no way it's getting nominated for Best Animated Feature. It's going to Croods 2, Soul, Onward, Trolls, and Scoob because they're more mainstream and popular. Prove me wrong, Academy. Prove me wrong. I'm generally a pretty open critic. I feel like every genre has its ups and every genre has its downs, but the genre I absolutely adore, no matter how good or bad it is Law. I don't know what it is, there's just something so captivating about them. However, even ignoring the slight bias I have for them, I can still acknowledge that The Trial of Chicago 7 is still great. One thing that this movie does to differentiate itself from the typical law drama is that it brings you right into the court without giving you background information until later. It's super unique and keeps you interested in the movie, because you're constantly looking for clues to what's going on. There are some scenes that drag on too long, but there are also scenes that really work, particularly in the way that the actors deliver their lines. There were some really fantastic performances in this movie, probably some of the best all year. Every character was fantastic, but my biggest compliment definitely goes to the judge. He is so well written to be unlikable that he creates probably the most hateable character of 2020. This movie is actually really decent, and I hope it gets nominated for something. Maybe an acting category, who knows. When I saw that Another Round had a 4.0 on Letterboxd, I immediately put it on my watch list because I truly believed it would be great. And I was right, of course. It's really hard to describe this movie without making it seem boring because this film is basically about teachers drinking during class. It sounds really boring on paper. However, do not underestimate the power of a simple, well-told narrative. This idea is developed so realistically while being a great character study for a depressed person. The only movie I can think that handles this better is The Incredibles. So yeah, this is a pretty great movie, guys. My big issue is how the movie is structured. A lot of emotional and important moments are really impactful on paper, but the movie keeps cutting to different storylines that are completely different. Yeah, there's a lot of tone whiplash in this film. Still, the compelling ideas and storylines are more than enough to make this a fun film, even if it isn't the best of the year. I like Palm Springs a tiny bit more than Groundhog Day. I never expected to say those words before. Now look, I figured this would be an average Groundhog Day ripoff with a lot of the same jokes and ideas, but that is not the case. In fact, just because there's two people stuck in the same day instead of one, this film becomes radically different. Oh, and also modern filmmaking and the actors and deliveries are all different. that probably bears mentioning. Even though this isn't quite as well put together as Groundhog Day, there's still a lot of creative ideas, like Niles being hunted by Roy all the time, the backwards time skipping, and a ton of small jokes that make this movie so different. Heck, it might actually be funnier than Groundhog Day. Now, that ending is really stupid, but it personally does not bother me that much, especially because they don't dwell on it too much. Yes, Old Guard is really better than Palm Springs. This is easily one of my favorite action films of all time. I love everything about this film. From the pacing, to the editing, to the action. Oh my god, the action. It's so clean and complex, and it's just so enticing. There's something so striking about the way it flawlessly shows immortality. The emotional beats are super solid. I've said it before, but the scene where we find out what happens to the lost immortal is easily the best scene in the movie, and a really tragic dark idea, showing that despite their godlike power, no immortal is truly immortal. This is also expressed through Andy's arc of learning to come to terms with her immortality, and her arc of seeing the good in humanity. We get to see her reaction to a new recruit, Niall, and Andy gets to see the good in her finally. It isn't just a boring, mindless action time killer. It's a really interesting, well put together movie. I just don't get the complaints. Never, rarely, sometimes, always is something so profoundly beautiful that it's hard to put into words just how gut-wrenching it is. I know a lot of people who are going to absolutely despise this film because there's less dialogue in that movie than my script for this video, but I for one was deeply touched. This is easily one of the most unique and memorable films of the decade. The way it handles heavy topics like rape, abuse, and overcoming obstacles is simply astounding. Every single character in their own right is special and unique. The two girls go on such a brave, emotional, devastating journey that I could not stop watching. The seemingly pointless encounters with multiple different people come together to paint a beautiful portrait of uniqueness and depth. None of these ideas are explicitly shown to us either. There's no scene where Autumn talks to Skylar about her horrible life. There's no scene where they start giving exposition. Hell, there's not even a scene where Autumn and Skylar have a conversation longer than 30 seconds. It's just a realistic journey. It gets to the point where we kind of feel like we're just watching these people's lives, rather than an actual movie. This is such a raw and genuine film that I am in love with. The only thing that would have made this film better is if Skylar and Autumn had ended up together, because seriously, there was definitely some sexual tension there in the beginning. Come on. I know they're cousins, but come on, man. Just uncousin them, okay? Please. It's definitely not for everyone, and I completely understand if you hate it, but goddamn, in my eyes, this is a revolutionary masterpiece. If the Academy is anything like me, this will be nominated for Best Picture. Just watch it, please. Where do I even begin when describing Wolfwalkers? I genuinely can't express how much this movie has won my heart. In a year with so many surprisingly great films, Wolfwalkers stands in a league of its own. The amount of culture present in this 2D gorgeous film is absolutely insane. The amount of times I was simply blown away with what they were able to accomplish with the medium of animation is too many to count. This is a story that could only be told in animation, as there are so many beautiful visions and lights that blew me away. There is something so grand about the way this movie portrays its story, with the score perfectly encapsulating a magical feeling that's so hypnotizing. The other neat thing about this movie, besides everything, is how consistent the final product is. Every scene is gut-wrenchingly real, every story beat is shocking and suspenseful, every frame is gorgeous. It's just magic through and through. I normally don't put animated movies as my favorite of the year, because you're most likely to get a fantastic film that's not animated, because there are just so many more not animated films than animated films, but I could not ignore just how invested I was in this beautiful, stunning achievement. I know it's not going to win Best Animated Feature because Soul, but in my opinion, it isn't even close. Wolfwalkers isn't just the best movie of the year, it isn't just the only 10 out of 10 of this year, but it is also more grand and arguably better than The Lion King. I don't know what more there is to say. Well, that's my list. I know I haven't seen many films, but I'll try to see more. Anyway, I'm gonna go finish the post-Renaissance movies. Bye.